Imagine a wildly successful executive. Wall Street is throwing a massive party in his honor. He just reported record-shattering profits, tens of billions of dollars in the green. Everyone is cheering, analysts are tripping over themselves to upgrade his stock, and from the outside, it looks like an absolute undeniable triumph. But as the confetti falls, there's a quiet, almost comical reality hidden behind the curtain. If you look closely at his actual physical bank account, it's practically empty. Net profit is just a theory. Cash in the pocket is reality. To make matters weirder, despite his net worth exploding on paper, he's quietly slipping out the back door of his own party to frantically apply for massive unsecured loans. And his neighbor across the street. He just fired 30,000 of his own employees on April Fool's Day, not because his business is failing, not even close. He just desperately needed their salary money to buy computer graphics cards. It paints a bizarre picture of financial desperation, perfectly masked as absolute victory. But what really struck me, beyond the sheer absurdity of the world's wealthiest tech giants practically maxing out their credit cards, was why they were doing it. They aren't bleeding themselves dry from failure. They are doing it out of sheer panic.
You know, if you really put yourself right in the center of that metaphorical party, just kind of watching this whole thing unfold, you're basically witnessing probably the most profound financial paradox of our time. You are looking at this ecosystem where the numbers on the screen they've completely decoupled from the actual physical reality of the vault.
Yeah, it feels entirely contradictory. I mean, we're talking about the titans of the tech sector, right?
Right.
These are the exact companies that, define that whole lightweight, infinitely scalable software revolution.
Exactly. But now they're suddenly behaving like these panicked, like heavy industry construction conglomerates from, the 1920s or something.
Wow, yeah.
The disconnect between those big headline numbers that Wall Street just loves to celebrate and the brutal metallic reality of their daily operations, it's absolutely staggering.
Yeah.
And to truly grasp this, you have to look past the press releases.
Right.
You have to step directly into the nervous system of these companies, like right at the exact moment the quarterly numbers are being finalized.
Okay, so let's do exactly that. Let's picture a specific scene playing out.
Sure.
Imagine we're in a Mountain View office. It's late at night. And we've got a vice president of treasury, let's call him Elias.
Okay, Elias.
Right. And he's got this pale blue glow from his monitor just illuminating his face. He looks exhausted. And he is staring directly at a glowing Q3 earnings draft.
And, I mean, the headline number he's looking at on that draft, it's magnificent.
The draft shows an 81% surge in net profit.
81%.
81%. I mean, Wall Street is going to absolutely feast on that number tomorrow morning,
They'll eat it up.
But as the VP of Treasury, Elias is not celebrating at all. He actually feels this, suffocating tightness in his chest.
Because he knows what happens the second he scrolls down to the footnotes of that exact same document.
Because nearly 60% of that massive profit he's about to report to the world, it's a total phantom.
A complete illusion.
Right. It's a mark-to-market valuation bump from a portfolio of AI startups they invested in, 18 months prior.
So it's just paper wealth.
Pure paper wealth. It's completely untouchable, highly illiquid.
And then, right on cue, the reality of his actual physical operations in truth.
His desk phone buzzes, and it's procurement on the line.
Oh, it's procurement.
Right. And the contractors who are, actively pouring concrete and building out their new sprawling data center in Nevada, they're issuing an ultimatum.
What do they want?
They need $3.2 billion in hard, liquid cash.
Wow.
And it has to clear by Friday, because if that cash isn't wired, the delivery of 50,000 liquid-cooled GPUs will immediately be diverted to a direct competitor.
So Elias has to look away from his beautiful record-breaking profit sheet, and he has to pull up the company's operating cash flow dashboard.
And it is terrifyingly thin.
Heck.
I mean, they are burning through billions of dollars a month just to keep their existing servers from literally melting down.
Right, let alone funding the construction of entirely new, massive facilities.
Exactly. So you have the richest tech empire in human history practically living paycheck to paycheck, which sounds insane.
Yes.
They were completely choked by their own infrastructure demands.
So, with trembling fingers, Elias starts drafting an email to the CFO, officially requesting authorization to issue yet another massive round of corporate bonds.
So they're literally printing money on paper, but they're out here begging for coins in the real world just to feed this unquenchable silicon god.
But
And what's really fascinating here is the absolute tyranny of accounting rules, specifically this principle known as mark-to-market valuation.
okay, I really want to break this down. because this is where the math feels completely divorced from reality.
Yes.
Let's look at the exact data that mirrors the situation Elias is facing. We are talking about Google's recent quarterly report.
A report that, by the way, was universally hailed as a massive blockbuster. Right. Revenue grew 22% year over year, which is incredibly solid growth for a company of that big. But the net profit, the big, shiny number everyone looks at, it skyrocketed by an astonishing 81%.
And naturally, Wall Street reacted exactly how you'd expect. 29 different financial analysts immediately rushed to upgrade their forecasts for the stock.
But wait, explain the actual mechanism behind this illusion. Like, how exactly does an 81% profit jump even happen without a massive influx of actual physical cash?
Well, it all comes down to where that profit mathematically originated. Out of Google's $62.6 billion in reported profit.
Okay, $62.6 billion.
Yeah, a staggering $36.9 billion of that came entirely from the rising valuation of the companies they had previously invested in.
Wait, so over half of their profit wasn't even from their own operations?
Correct, over half. And if we isolate that number even further, $28.7 billion of that profit was generated simply because the valuation of one single external company went up.
Anthropic. So just because Anthropic went out and raised more money from other people at a higher valuation, Google just gets to claim $28.7 billion in profit.
Yep.
That seems so absurd. How is that mechanically allowed?
It's actually not just allowed. It is legally required by GAAP generally accepted accounting principles.
How?
Nearly 60% of Google's net profit in this quarter was purely equity appreciation. Not a single cent of that $36.9 billion actually entered Google's physical bank accounts.
It's just a mandated financial hallucination?
That is a highly accurate way to describe it, honestly. When a portfolio company's valuation increases, the investor's book profit must reflect that increase.
Right, to show shareholders the current value.
Exactly, to show the current value of the company's assets. So net profit calculates what you theoretically earned across everything you touch, but free cash flow, that calculates what actually physically went into the vault.
And right now, those two numbers are living in completely different universes.
Completely different galaxies, honestly.
Okay, let's put this in a way that maps perfectly to, like, everyday life.
Okay.
Because it's wild. It is exactly like having a $3 million mortgage on your house, right? And you are stretched incredibly thin. You're paying that mortgage month to month, practically emptying your checking account every 30 days just to keep the lights on and buy groceries.
So your cash flow is super tight.
Incredibly tight. But you also happen to have a stock portfolio on the side, and purely on paper, the market went absolutely crazy, and your portfolio just jumped from $1 million to $4 million in value overnight.
Nice.
Right. Because of that unrealized, uncashed gain, your bank looks at your overall spreadsheet and says, wow, you are a premium, incredibly wealthy borrower.
Right, your net worth has absolutely exploded. The bank is thrilled to have you.
But if you try to go down to the grocery store right now to buy a gallon of milk, your checking account is still completely empty. You cannot eat paper equity, and companies cannot pay construction contractors with an Anthropic valuation spreadsheet.
Not. Which brings us to the core discrepancy that is absolutely terrifying. The internal treasury departments of these tech giants right now. Where is the actual physical cash going?
It's disappearing into a black hole.
A massive black hole called capital expenditures, or CapEx.
Right.
And the scale of this black hole is, I mean, it's without historical precedent in the software industry.
I mean, Google announced a jaw-dropping $190 billion in CapEx for the year.
$190 billion.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, that is twice what they spent in 2025. And it's 8.5 times what they spent in 2020.
I have to push back here, though, because this fundamentally challenges how we even understand these companies. Why does a lightweight software company like Google suddenly need $190 billion for heavy assets? I mean, this is a company that sells digital advertisements.
Right.
They sell search results, they write code, they don't build car factories, they don't manufacture steel or physical consumer goods. So why do they need a budget that looks like they are building the interstate highway system from scratch?
It's because the fundamental nature of their operational reality has completely changed. They've gone from digital to physical.
Okay.
They are taking almost every single dollar of free cash flow they manage to generate from ads and search, and they are converting it directly into physical infrastructure.
Right, we were talking about graphics processing units,
GPUs,
GPUs.
massive server racks,
Yeah.
industrial cooling systems required so they don't catch fire.
And the massive concrete data centers required just to house all of it.
Exactly. Training these massive artificial intelligence language models and providing the underlying cloud infrastructure to run them. It is no longer a software engineering problem. It is a heavy industrial manufacturing problem.
Right.
They are buying heavy machinery on a scale we've never seen.
And this transition is happening so violently and so suddenly that even the most profitable companies on Earth cannot fund it out of their own pockets.
They absolutely cannot. They just do not have the liquid cash reserves on hand to keep up with the physical build-out. So they are doing exactly what Elias was doing in our scenario earlier. They are issuing bonds. They are taking on massive, staggering amounts of debt.
Wow.
In the first quarter alone, Google went directly to the debt markets and issued $31.1 billion in senior unsecured notes.
So they are actively borrowing tens of billions in cash to buy physical metal, all while simultaneously reporting record-breaking paper wealth to the public.
It is the ultimate sleight of hand,
Right.
and it's facilitated entirely by the gap between accounting rules and operational reality.
And this exact same crisis is unfolding over at Amazon, too.
Absolutely.
They are reading from the exact same script, but honestly, the stakes are arguably even higher for them.
So,
While Amazon also invested heavily in Anthropic, just like Google did.
which means they also reaped the massive benefits of that exact same mark-to-market valuation bump.
Which resulted in a 77% year-over-year jump in their net profit. But when you look at the reality of their daily operations, Amazon's free cash flow didn't just dip slightly under the pressure, it plummeted 95% into the negative for the first quarter.
95% negative. I mean, that is a hemorrhage of liquid capital.
But why is Amazon bleeding cash so much faster than Google, even with the same AI investments?
Because Amazon's situation is structurally far more complex. Unlike Google, which operates almost entirely in the digital realm aside from these new data centers, Amazon is fundamentally a massive physical logistics company.
Of course, they have global e-commerce infrastructure.
Exactly. They have massive fleets of delivery vans, highly automated warehouses, and physical fulfillment centers strategically placed all over the globe.
And they have to physically maintain and staff all of that constantly.
Right. They already have immense ongoing capital expenditures just to keep the retail side of their business functioning every day.
So when they decided to heavily pivot and invest in generative AI infrastructure post-2023,
Buying up GPUs, breaking ground on entirely new data centers,
they essentially stacked a new, infinitely demanding physical burden directly on top of an already very heavy foundation.
Exactly.
So if we look at Amazon's overall balance sheet, how are they funding this dual-front war? I mean, they are fighting a war in global logistics and a war in generative AI infrastructure simultaneously.
They are funding it by accumulating debt at an alarming rate. And the paradox here becomes almost surreal when you actually look at the math.
Let's hear the math.
Their actual hard debt climbed from $300 billion to $400 billion over the past 5 years.
Wow.
They literally owe $100 billion more in cold, hard cash today than they did half a decade ago.
But wait, I'm looking at their debt ratio, and mathematically, their debt ratio actually fell below 50%. How is that mathematically possible if they just took on $100 billion in new debt?
Because the paper wealth generated from their investment in Anthropic, Camorament, artificially inflated the asset side of their balance sheet. It diluted the liability side. The accounting rules say their assets exploded in value because of the Anthropic valuation.
Right.
Therefore, even though they owe $100 billion more in actual cash, the ratio of their debt to their total assets decreased.
They look like a safer bet to lenders, precisely because of the phantom wealth.
Exactly. This accounting optical illusion gave Amazon the immense confidence and, crucially, the premium credit rating to go out to the global markets and issue another $53.4 billion in senior unsecured bonds.
And the structure of those bonds is what really highlights the desperation here, I think. They didn't just issue standard 10-year notes. They actually issued 50-year ultra-long corporate bonds.
Think about the pure audacity of that financial maneuver.
Wild. You have a technology company operating in an industry where software paradigms shift entirely every 6 months, right? Taking out a 50-year loan. And what are they buying with that 50-year loan?
Computer chips.
Computer chips that will be completely obsolete and practically worthless in 3 years.
It is the absolute definition of a desperate sprint masked to the public as strategic foresight. They just need the lowest possible immediate payment terms to hoard whatever cash they can today.
Even if it means carrying the debt for half a century. Which brings us to the actual front lines of this sprint.
Yeah.
Let's step away from the Treasury departments for a minute and look at the sales floor.
Sure.
Picture another scenario. The silence on a WebEx call is heavier than concrete.
Oh, I've been on those calls.
Right. We have a senior account executive.
Okay.
She works at Seattle's largest cloud provider.
Yeah.
And she is currently maintaining a highly practiced, completely serene smile on her face.
While the client on the other end is furious.
Beyond furious. The CEO of a highly valued AI unicorn is barking through the speakers, actively threatening to pull their $500 million contract.
$500 million.
He says, point blank, if you cannot guarantee the compute power by next month, we are moving our entire operation to your competitor.
And Sarah knows the reality of their infrastructure.
She does. So she calmly assures the CEO that their dedicated H100 clusters are in final staging. It is a bold, terrifying lie. She quickly mutes her microphone and just lets her forehead rest against the cold mahogany of her desk. Her stomach is churning with this completely toxic mix of adrenaline and shame.
Because there is no staging.
Zero. The backlog is hundreds of billions of dollars deep. The physical servers that she's promising to this client haven't even been manufactured at the foundry yet. And the data center that is meant to house those non-existent servers, it is still a flat dirt lot in rural Texas.
And she is keenly aware of how her company is desperately trying to fix this.
Right, because just 10 minutes prior to this exact call, she had read an internal memo. The company was quietly taking out a massive, highly punishing syndicated loan.
It's a desperate, highly leveraged sprint to pour concrete and build facilities faster than their clients can realize they are currently buying vaporware.
Exactly. So Sarah unmutes herself, ensures her voice is perfectly steady, and promises the world to this client, all while silently praying the entire house of cards won't collapse before her stock options finally vest.
You know, Sarah's nightmare is not just a hypothetical stress stream. It is mathematically documented on the balance sheets of every single major tech firm right now.
Under what?
Under a very specific accounting term, remaining performance obligations.
This is the backlog.
This is the backlog. And you have to understand exactly what this metric represents. This is not a speculative sales pipeline.
It's not a projection.
No, this is not a hopeful projection of future revenue.
Exactly.
This is hard money. These are ironclad contracts that have been signed and delivered to the doorstep, but that the cloud computing companies physically cannot digest yet.
Right.
It represents complex computing orders that clients have formally committed to paying for, but the cloud providers cannot currently deliver because the physical infrastructure simply does not exist.
And the data on these remaining performance obligations is absolutely staggering.
Let us look at the numbers. Microsoft's backlog surged 161%.
Wow.
It went from $242 billion to $633 billion.
$633 billion in signed contracts for compute power they can't provide yet.
Amazon's backlog more than doubled, jumping from $157.7 billion to $364 billion.
Right.
And Google's backlog exploded by nearly 6.5 times. It skyrocketed from $72.5 billion to an almost incomprehensible $467.6 billion.
So if you add all that up, we're looking at well over $1 trillion in signed contracts for Ghost servers. Let's outline the core dynamic of this cloud war, because the business model seems incredibly straightforward at first glance. You have the top 3 cloud providers, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. Their job is to build the physical compute power.
Right. They buy the land, they pour the concrete for the data centers,
install the massive industrial cooling systems, and physically rack the NVIDIA servers.
and then they turn around and rent that computing power to the AI companies.
Right. Companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, who absolutely need it to train their next generation models.
So the AI companies get the massive processing power they need without having to build a massive data center themselves.
And the cloud companies get a highly lucrative, steady stream of rental income. It seems like a perfect symbiosis.
Yes.
For example, Amazon signed a 10-year, $100 billion server lease agreement with Anthropic back in April. But this is where it gets really interesting and frankly, completely irrational from a traditional business perspective. I have to challenge this logic.
Okay, challenge it.
If you are Amazon and you have a guaranteed ironclad $100 billion contract locked in for a full decade,
Right.
why are you behaving like Sarah's company in that WebEx call? Why are you taking out massive high-interest syndicated loans in a sheer panic?
Jen.
Why not just execute the build-out steadily over the 10 years using standard low-risk financing? I mean, you have the guaranteed revenue, right? Just build it normally.
Because the entire compute supply chain is fundamentally crippled. It cannot move at the speed of the contracts being signed. The graphics cards, specifically the high-end chips manufactured almost exclusively by NVIDIA, are being delivered far too slowly. There's an absolute bottleneck at the foundries.
And even if you get the chips, you have to put them somewhere.
The physical construction of the data centers themselves, the pouring of thousands of tons of concrete, the laying of heavy-duty copper wiring, the custom installation of these liquid cooling systems.
It takes time.
It is a painfully inefficient real-world process. It is subject to permitting, labor shortages, and supply chain delays. It does not and cannot move at the speed of software development.
But the AI companies cannot wait for concrete to dry.
They absolutely cannot. The AI space is currently an arms race.
Right.
If an AI company waits 6 months for their cloud provider to bring the required compute power online, their next generation model falls 6 months behind their direct competitors.
And in this market, falling 6 months behind means they lose their multi-billion-dollar valuation practically overnight.
Exactly. The pressure from venture capital is immense.
So if Amazon attempts to build out their infrastructure at a steady, financially responsible, unleveraged pace,
The client will not wait.
they'll just leave.
Anthropic, or any other AI firm, will immediately pivot, tear up the contract citing failure to deliver, and hand that massive pile of cash directly to Microsoft or Google, assuming they can build it faster.
So it is an all-or-nothing game.
If you want a seat at the table in the generative AI era, you must push all your chips to the center immediately. You must go all in, or you get out entirely. There's no middle ground.
Ow.
Look at the timeline of Google's finances for proof of this panic. Up until the third quarter of 2023, Google's net profit, their free cash flow, and their capital expenditures were actually highly balanced.
They were operating like a normal, healthy, massively successful business.
But after that specific quarter, right when the AI infrastructure demands hit critical mass,
What happened?
those three metrics decoupled entirely. They shuddered. Capital expenditure shot completely into the stratosphere, while cash flow plunged toward the floor, driven purely by the absolute panic of this massive backlog accumulation. They realized they had to build instantly, regardless of the cost.
Okay, now let's pivot and look at Microsoft because they are deeply engaged in this exact same desperate game.
Oh, heavily.
But they are playing it with a distinctly different set of accounting rules, which is fascinating. Microsoft placed an incredibly heavy early bet on OpenAI, and OpenAI currently sits at a staggering $852 billion valuation.
Right. But Microsoft's situation is technically quite different from Google or Amazon due to a very specific and, frankly, brutal accounting rule that they triggered with that investment.
So, what rule?
Microsoft's deep entanglement with OpenAI triggered a financial mechanism called the equity method of accounting.
Okay.
Because Microsoft originally acquired a massive 49% stake in OpenAI, they crossed a highly critical legal and financial threshold known as significant influence.
So this is different from the mark-to-market rule we discussed with Google and Anthropic. Okay.
When you hold a minor stake, you just record the changing paper value of the stock, like we saw with Google. But when you exert significant influence over a company, you no longer just record the changing value of their shares, you become tethered to their actual operational reality. The equity method dictates that you share the wealth, but you're also legally obligated to share the pain.
Okay, so what does sharing the pain look like mathematically for Microsoft?
It means that when the company you invested in loses money, when they aggressively burn through cash to train models, you must record a proportional percentage of that exact loss directly onto your own balance sheet.
And OpenAI burns cash like jet fuel.
Exactly. In the third quarter of the previous year, OpenAI's extreme cash burn rate forced Microsoft to swallow a $4.1 billion net loss directly on its own books.
$4.1 billion of pure red ink. And this is generated by a company that Microsoft doesn't even fully own, but it is aggressively dragging down Microsoft's bottom line.
But then the accounting magic trick returns to save the optics.
Yes.
By the fourth quarter, OpenAI underwent a highly complex capital restructuring.
What changed?
Microsoft's official stake was strategically reduced. It was moved from that 49% threshold down to 27%.
Okay, so they dipped below the threshold.
Exactly. And in that exact same window, new outside investors rushed in and provided a massive new valuation for OpenAI overall.
So because of that massive new valuation, combined with the reduced stake,
Microsoft was suddenly able to instantly recognize a $10 billion gain on the remaining 27% stake.
in an instant, the previous $4.1 billion operational loss was completely wiped out and overshadowed by $10 billion in paper gains.
It is a masterful manipulation of the ledger. But as observers of this paradox, we must look past the ledger.
Right, because the physical reality is still there.
The paper gains successfully cover the paper losses in the eyes of Wall Street, sure. But Microsoft's physical cash burn is just as real. Their actual out-of-pocket spending to build the infrastructure required to support OpenAI is just as intense, if not more intense, than its rivals.
The accounting maneuvers simply mask the physical reality of the massive investment. And that physical reality is a staggering figure. I mean, we're talking about nearly $30 billion in capital expenditures in a single quarter during Q4 of the previous year.
$30 billion.
In just 90 days.
That cash was entirely converted into physical assets, GPUs, specialized servers, and the heavy metal server racks required to hold them.
Now, I want to put that specific spending spree into a historical context because I think it really highlights the massive buyer's remorse that must be echoing through the halls of Microsoft leadership right now.
Okay.
Look back to January of 2022. Just before the generative AI boom truly consumed the entire industry, Microsoft spent $69 billion to acquire the video game giant Activision Blizzard.
Right. At the time, it was the largest technology acquisition in history.
Right. Now contrast the tepid, sluggish performance of their XBOX and gaming division today with the frantic, desperate buying of unpowered GPUs. They spent $69 billion on a legacy media asset just months before the AI revolution demanded every available cent of capital.
The timing is incredible in hindsight.
Management must be experiencing the most intense buyer's remorse imaginable. They bought a massive video game company when they desperately needed to be buying nuclear power plants and silicon foundries.
Really?
Every available dollar, every cent of corporate leverage is now needed for AI infrastructure, and they have $69 billion permanently tied up in legacy gaming IP like Call of Duty.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the darker side of this transition, honestly.
Yeah.
When companies realize they are holding the wrong assets, and they become desperate for cash to buy the right ones, the consequences for the human element of these corporations become devastating.
Right.
This is where the immense financial pressure translates directly into human sacrifice.
This brings us to another scene that illustrates the human cost of this frantic pivot. We are in a sterile corporate conference room. Marcus adjusts his tie. His throat is completely dry.
He's nervous.
He is looking across the table at Helen. Helen is a senior database architect. She is a 14-year veteran of the company who had literally built the legacy systems that made the company its billions over the last decade.
And Marcus is there to fire her.
He is sliding a manila folder containing her severance package across the desk. He recites the rehearsed corporate script. It's a strategic realignment, Helen. The market is shifting. His voice is completely devoid of the humanity he desperately wants to project. He watches her hands tremble as she signs the papers, and he feels a sickening wave of self-contempt.
Because Marcus knows the exact financial reality behind the realignment.
He knows exactly where her budget is going. It has nothing to do with efficiency. On his monitor upstairs, he has a spreadsheet open titled Project Phoenix.
Right.
It details the brutal math of what is actually happening. The salaries, the health benefits, the very livelihoods of Helen and 300 other legacy engineers are being entirely liquidated. And why? To fund a single astronomical purchase order for NVIDIA GPUs.
Management wasn't just restructuring the company.
They were emptying the corporate treasury, pawning the proverbial furniture, and actively sacrificing their loyal flesh and blood workforce just to buy a seat at the AI roulette table. As Helen quietly packs up her desk, Marcus realizes with a cold dread that they aren't innovators anymore.
God.
They are desperate gamblers tossing their own people into the furnace just to keep the lights on in the casino.
You know, Marcus's story is the exact lived reality unfolding within Oracle right now.
Let's talk about Oracle.
Oracle is a company that can best be described as a living fossil of the original software era. 70% of its total revenue still comes from its highly profitable but entirely legacy database businesses.
Right, these are the ancient, deeply embedded systems that run old corporate mainframes across the globe.
Exactly. But that legacy business is stagnant. It is barely growing at single-digit percentages year over year.
Yeah.
However, Oracle's future, a future that Wall Street has projected to account for 92% of their total incremental revenue growth going forward, relies entirely on one single pillar, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
So they are betting their entire corporate existence on successfully transitioning from a software dinosaur to a premier AI cloud provider.
And the crisis they are facing in that transition is existential. Oracle has managed to amass a staggering backlog, those remaining performance obligations we discussed, of over $500 billion.
Wait, $500 billion? That is a larger backlog than either Google or Amazon.
Yet Oracle has the absolute weakest financial foundation of the entire group. They're trying to play at the highest high rollers table, but they only have 1/10 of Google's actual net profit.
So they have less money coming in, but a bigger pile of orders they have to physically build.
Exactly. Despite having a fraction of the resources of the trillion-dollar giants, they are attempting to execute an even more aggressive capital expenditure strategy.
How is that financially possible without going bankrupt?
The financial consequences of this strategy are extremely dire. Oracle is essentially funding its data center down payments through high-interest corporate payday loans.
Wow.
They simply do not have the free cash flow to build the massive infrastructure required to clear a $500 billion backlog, so they are borrowing at punishingly high rates.
And the banks have to see this, right? They aren't blind to the risk.
The institutional banking sector has absolutely caught on to the extreme risk profile here. Barclays issued a stark warning recently, stating publicly that at their current cash burn rate, Oracle could run completely out of cash by late 2026.
Run out of cash entirely in 2 years.
Yes. Furthermore, TD Cowen published a highly critical note observing that major U.S. banks have actively halted lending to any data center projects associated with Oracle. The traditional low-interest credit markets are actively closing their doors to them.
So if you are Oracle management and you are sitting on $500 billion in undelivered orders and the major banks flat out refuse to loan you the money to build the servers to fulfill those orders, what do you do?
You are pushed to extreme measures to find cash internally.
Which perfectly explains the April Fool's Day massacre.
Right.
On April 1st, Oracle fired 30,000 of its own employees. And the narrative that was widely spun to the public and the media was that this was a classic AI replacing jobs story. It was framed as the inevitable, sad march of automation taking over coding jobs.
Well, that is an entirely false narrative.
It had nothing to do with artificial intelligence doing the work of human engineers. It was a brutal, purely mathematical cash grab. By liquidating 30,000 salaries, Oracle instantly freed up nearly $10 billion in free cash flow.
They took that $10 billion of human capital and handed it directly, dollar for dollar, to NVIDIA to purchase the physical GPUs required to convert their $500 billion backlog into actual recognizable cash.
They burned the village to fuel the engine. They sacrificed their present workforce to buy the hardware needed for their future survival.
But Oracle is not alone in this kind of desperate gambling. We also have to look at the massive bets being placed in the investment sector, specifically Masayoshi Son and SoftBank. Right. SoftBank committed over $60 billion to OpenAI. It is an astronomical sum.
But SoftBank did not have $60 billion in liquid free cash flow sitting idle in a checking account.
No, they did not. So to fund this massive, potentially world-altering commitment, Sun did exactly what a desperate gambler does when they genuinely believe they have a sure thing on the next hand. He liquidated his prime assets.
He entirely cleared out SoftBank's massive holdings in NVIDIA and Alibaba stock. He sold off their lucrative stake in T-Mobile.
And perhaps most dangerously from a risk perspective, he actively pledged SoftBank's massive foundational holdings of ARM shares as collateral to borrow even more capital from lenders. If you look back to the dawn of the smartphone revolution, when the iPhone and Android first emerged, you had hardware companies like HTC and Samsung.
Okay.
They recognized the tectonic shift in the market and safely adopted the open Android operating system.
They accepted that they would lose control of the software ecosystem and just become somewhat average, commoditized hardware makers.
They swallowed their pride. And because of that, they survived and thrived in the new era. Nokia, however, was the former undisputed king of mobile phones.
They had massive global market share.
Yes. And the psychology of a former king is highly dangerous in business. They could not accept the perceived mediocrity of just being another interchangeable Android manufacturer. They felt they had to remain royalty.
So what did they do?
So they bound themselves exclusively to Microsoft's Windows Phone operating system in a massive, high-risk, multi-billion-dollar gamble to completely bypass Android and reclaim the absolute throne. They took the existential gamble, the all-or-nothing bet.
And they lost everything.
They were entirely wiped out of the hardware market. Oracle and SoftBank are currently exhibiting that exact same behavioral psychology.
Oh.
They are former undisputed kings of the tech world. They are fundamentally unwilling to accept a secondary commoditized role in the new AI landscape. So they're taking on catastrophic levels of debt and risk in an all-or-nothing bet to remain at the absolute pinnacle of global power.
So we have to step back and critically analyze this entire landscape. We have trillion-dollar companies acting like highly leveraged, desperate real estate speculators.
Right.
They are actively gutting their massive workforces, hiding behind complex mark-to-market accounting tricks to inflate their wealth, and simultaneously begging banks for high-interest loans. The ultimate question we have to answer is this frantic, debt-fueled sprint actually justified by reality? Or are we witnessing the rapid inflation of the most spectacular, debt-ridden mega bubble in the history of modern capitalism?
The complexity of answering that question lies in the undeniable fact that the underlying demand for this technology is undeniably brutally real.
It isn't just hype.
No. This is not a speculative bubble based on abstract financial derivatives, like the 2008 housing crisis. It is rooted in severe physical scarcity. Everything required to build this artificial intelligence future is in absolute shortage.
Let's break down those physical bottlenecks.
First, the graphics processing units are severely bottlenecked at the TSMC foundries in Taiwan. They simply cannot print the silicon fast enough. Second, the specialized high-bandwidth memory chips required to feed data into those GPUs are incredibly scarce.
But there is an even bigger bottleneck, right? A much older, much more fundamental constraint.
Most crucially, the physical electricity required to power these massive new data center facilities simply does not exist in the required quantities on the current global power grids. The constraints are highly tangible.
What does the data say about this power demand?
Look at the projections from Goldman Sachs. They project that data center power demand will surge by an unprecedented 160% by the year 2030.
160%. The grid barely handles air conditioning in the summer right now.
Exactly. And currently, prime data center vacancy rates have plummeted to a microscopic 3%.
What does a 3% vacancy rate actually mean in practice?
It means that even if a company like Google or Microsoft had infinite cash directly on hand, they literally cannot buy the physical space or the necessary power grid capacity to plug their new servers in. Doesn't exist to be bought.
How?
Morgan Stanley reported earlier this year that the raw demand for computing power vastly, structurally exceeds the physical supply chain's ability to provide it.
And you can see the bizarre side effects of this extreme constraint playing out in real time. Just look at OpenAI earlier this year.
The Sora situation.
Yes. They had this highly anticipated, jaw-dropping video generation model called Sora. It was generating hyper-realistic video from text prompts. It was ready to completely revolutionize the digital media and Hollywood landscapes.
Right.
And they intentionally halted it. They put it on ice.
Why would they delay a revolutionary product?
Because generating video requires immense processing power. It is incredibly compute-heavy. And OpenAI realized they had to strictly hoard their extremely limited compute resources to support their programming and text-based models, like ChatGPT enterprise tools, which are currently vastly more commercially lucrative.
They are actively rationing compute power like water in a desert.
They have the software ready, but they literally don't have the electricity and silicon to run it at scale for the public.
And this panic, this severe rationing and desperate spending, is absolutely not isolated to Silicon Valley. It is a synchronized global phenomenon.
How is it playing out internationally?
Chinese technology giants are making the exact same brutal financial sacrifices to secure their own sovereign AI infrastructure. ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, saw its net profit plunge by an incredible 70% as they frantically diverted resources to capital expenditures for AI.
70% of their profit wiped out by hardware costs.
Yes. Alibaba's free cash flow turned completely negative under the extreme strain of infrastructure building. Even Tencent, a massive company traditionally known for highly conservative, cautious financial management, is suddenly spending lavishly.
They're all in.
They're entirely blowing out their capital expenditure budgets to secure physical AI assets before they run out.
The realization that compute power is the new global currency has triggered an international arms race.
But despite the massive debt and the panic, the music is still playing, right?
Right. The reason these tech giants haven't completely collapsed under this massive mountain of corporate debt is because, at least for now, the staggering spending is generating actual returns. The numbers that Wall Street ultimately cares about are still going up.
Let's look at the specific data points that are keeping the lights on in this casino.
Google's cloud business, even if you exclude all the one-time, non-recurring items, grew an incredible 63% year over year. That is massive growth for an established business unit.
Microsoft's cloud division grew 22% over 9 months, with their Azure and cloud services jumping 31%.
And crucially, Microsoft explicitly attributes 13% of that Azure growth directly, solely to new AI workloads. The cloud providers are seeing actual, undeniable revenue growth from the infrastructure they do manage to get online.
And the AI companies themselves, the ones renting the servers and paying those cloud providers, are practically printing money.
Let's look at Anthropic as the prime example. Their daily active users are actually tiny compared to the market leader. They have less than 2% of ChatGPT's user base. It's a fraction of the footprint.
But look at their revenue trajectory.
It is explosive. Anthropic's annualized revenue skyrocketed from $9 billion to $44 billion. That is a scale of massive financial growth that significantly outpaces the explosion of Zoom during the absolute peak of the global pandemic. It even outpaces Google's own legendary revenue growth during the early 2000s dot-com boom.
Because of these astronomical revenue numbers, Anthropic's private valuation now actually exceeds OpenAI's current valuation, while OpenAI is simultaneously accelerating toward a massive September IPO that is targeting a mind-bending $1 trillion valuation.
When you synthesize this entire ecosystem, the mechanics of the boom become incredibly clear. It is a highly leveraged, perfectly interlocked supply chain of valuation.
Break down how the capital flows through that chain.
Upstream, you have NVIDIA. They are raking in hard physical cash. They are the ones actually selling the physical shovels in the middle of this gold rush. Downstream, you have the AI software models like OpenAI and Anthropic. They are ballooning in paper valuation, fueled almost entirely by venture capital and market hype.
But in the middle, connecting those two ends, you have the cloud providers, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle.
They are the bridge. And they are absorbing all the physical stress. They are holding massive undelivered orders, severely tightening their operational belts, gutting their legacy staff, and drowning in corporate debt to build the physical infrastructure that connects NVIDIA's chips to the AI company's software.
And right now, today, the market is completely validating this extreme risk. Because mathematically, every single dollar of capital expenditure spent by the cloud providers on infrastructure seems to yield $2 in market capitalization growth. Wall Street rewards the spending.
It is absolutely identical to heavily leveraged real estate speculation. It is exactly like maxing out every single credit card you own, taking out 5 different high-interest mortgages, and buying 5 houses all at once, based entirely on the absolute, unshakable assumption that the real estate market will double in value by tomorrow morning.
The underlying financial logic dictates that the more money you bet today, no matter how much you have to borrow or sacrifice to do it, the bigger the assumed payout will be, so nobody stops buying.
We have watched the titans of the digital world, the very companies that champion the frictionless, weightless economy of software and the internet, quietly morph into heavily indebted, panicked construction companies. They are racing against the clock, fighting their own balance sheets and liquidating their past to fund a future that requires more raw capital than they have ever possessed.
Consider the immense fragility of this entire ecosystem. We are witnessing the most advanced theoretical digital technology in human history being entirely bottlenecked by the most ancient physical constraints: concrete, copper wires, and raw electricity. If the power grid simply taps out before the artificial intelligence reaches its promised commercial potential, this left foot, right foot upward spiral will snap. The wealthiest tech empires in the world won't just face a market correction. They will be left holding the deeds to the world's most heavily financed, debt-ridden scrap metal.